I held scissors to my neck after my mom called me greedy for not sharing my last piece of bread. I just couldn't take it anymore. I understand that the title may seem unbelievable, but I feel compelled to share the context behind it. This will be lengthy, so I appreciate your patience. I am a 26-year-old female living with my 60-year-old mother. Although I realize I should find my own place, the city I reside in is infamous for its exorbitant living costs, making rent so unaffordable that even couples and families require roommates. To begin with, I should provide some insight into my mother's character. She suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of her upbringing during a civil war and a brief stint as a child soldier, though I doubt she harmed anyone. She has endured various forms of abuse from family members, including my father, who, while not physically abusive, was emotionally and financially neglectful. I also have a younger brother, aged 25, who has distanced himself from everyone, including his friends, due to his own struggles and grievances with our mother. She objected to his military career, stemming from her past traumas, and he enlisted without her knowledge. We have not heard from him in years, which is deeply painful for both me and my mother. While I do not perceive my mother as a bad person, she has endured significant trauma and has made efforts to cope. As a parent, she provided for us, but sometimes her anger surfaced, influenced by her PTSD. Moving forward, I will share how she interpreted my behavior. Whenever I acted out, she believed it was intentional and aimed at provoking her. Instead of viewing my actions as typical childish behavior, she saw them as deliberately spiteful. Throughout my childhood, I was subjected to physical punishment involving belts, hangers, slippers, and more. I have had objects thrown at me, and on occasion, she would pull my hair and spit in my face. This abusive behavior continued until I began university, at which point I became physically too large for her to assault. Nevertheless, I have endured taunts about my appearance, being labeled as big like a man, being compared to my father, and being called various derogatory names, often with wishes of blindness and regret for my existence. I have faced insults of all kinds, weekly. In addition to her PTSD, my mother suffers from multiple health issues, including chiari malformation, nerve damage, herniated discs, and depression. There is an extensive list of her ailments. As a result, I accompanied her to medical appointments and welfare assistance meetings for years, until she was officially deemed too unwell to continue attending so many appointments. For a child, this experience was mentally and emotionally exhausting. Our family's financial instability was evident, and I realized how quickly it could all vanish. My mother had previously worked as a foster caregiver, a role that required diligent record-keeping. I often took it upon myself to assist her as she struggled with reading and writing. Before and after that period, she worked as a cleaner. From the age of 12, I helped her clean houses. When job hunting became necessary, I filled out her job applications for her from an early age. I received no gratitude, only comments like, "You have to do this," or, "I'm too exhausted, busy, not feeling well, it's your responsibility." Realizing how reliant she was on me at such a young age was terrifying. I felt constant anxiety about finances and was never acknowledged for my efforts. And if I upset her, I faced her spitting and physical aggression. I have never retaliated or inflicted harm upon her, nor have I ever confided in anyone about this. At 15, I came out as bisexual. Although I shouldn't have done so, I found courage in an online community I had joined. My mother cried uncontrollably, feeling as though her world had been shattered. I also experienced severe bullying at school, including an incident when a girl from outside my school attempted to confront me because she had heard about the bisexual girl. During this troubling time, my mother supported me, not out of acceptance, but because her daughter was under attack and she called the authorities. The girl was apprehended and compelled to apologize. I chose not to pursue charges against her. However, just days later, while driving on the motorway, my mother confronted me, tears streaming down her face, asking if I was genuinely bisexual. I affirmed my identity, and she became tearful, threatening to crash the car if I didn't recant my statement. Fearing for our lives, I hastily claimed it was just a phase. She decreased her speed, and we never revisited the topic. I never revealed the truth to anyone. Fast forward to when I turned 22. Throughout my upbringing, I heard my mother assign blame to women in cases of rape, saying statements like, "He is despicable," But she should have dressed differently, shouldn't have gone out at night. Why did she go to his house? At 22, I decided to start dating. To this day, I ponder how drastically different my life could have been had I not gone on that particular date. The experience ended with me trapped in an apartment for 11 hours, during which the man bit me, spat on me, and sexually assaulted me. I was eventually freed, prompted by my mother's persistent calls checking on my whereabouts, which made him panic and allow me to leave when he had originally intended for me to stay the night. I immediately recognized that I could never disclose what had happened to my mother. First, I knew she would have an adverse reaction due to her health, requiring me to accompany her for her own hospitalization rather than addressing my own trauma. Second, I was aware I would face blame. Why? Because I had naively believed a man who claimed he wanted to cook dinner for me. The following day, I spent 6 hours alone in a police station, without any friends available to support me due to their strict home rules. I was cold, waiting for a female officer to be present for my interview. Upon arriving home, I told my mother I needed to report a robbery I had witnessed. She never noticed the bruises or bite marks on my arms, nor did she observe any change in my demeanor. She likely interpreted it as just me being moody. I sat alone in that interview room because of her. I received a diagnosis of PTSD and went through that experience by myself, all because of her. I was forced to maintain a facade due to her needs, her appointments, and the substantial support she required. Yet, I never received a word of thanks. It is worth noting that I did seek therapy and was tested afterward. I did not catch any diseases, and my therapist provided invaluable assistance. Eventually, I did confide in her. 2 years later, the catalyst was her desire to get rid of my cat due to her obsessive-compulsive disorder. She had gifted him to me 2 years prior, without realizing that cat hair would be a challenge. She reached a breaking point and demanded that I find him a new home. I stood firm, unable to accept this demand, as my cat was my emotional support during my recovery from the sexual assault. He had helped me rediscover the innocence in life, and I cherished the bond we shared. She was aware of my attachment to him, but her needs always came first in her own home. After hours of arguing, I finally revealed the truth: she could not part with him because he had aided my healing after I had been raped. She was taken aback, asking me to elaborate, but I was still too frightened to disclose the full truth, so I said it occurred in a park to absolve myself of any blame. She requested details, and once I explained, she inquired if any of my friends were aware of the situation. When I confirmed that they did, she stated that she didn't want to communicate with me because I confided in them before telling her. In that instant, I froze. She made it entirely about her. It took her several days to apologize for what I had endured, yet the scar she left remains in my heart. To compound matters, 2 years later, she attempted to get rid of my cat again while I was traveling, despite being fully aware of everything. My best friend had to take him in and care for him for approximately 6 months until my return. This hurts me deeply, as it feels like she either doesn't recall the incident that traumatized me, or doesn't consider it to be as significant as her objection to cat hair, even though there was barely any. Since my return, she has been incredibly helpful, as I have been financially struggling, and she has not charged me rent, even though her social benefits cover the entire rent. However, we have had several heated arguments during this period. Nevertheless, I have continued to assist her in various ways, including preventing the state from cutting her benefits by submitting necessary documents, a task she couldn't manage alone, which spared us from losing our home, attending medical appointments with her yet again, and dedicating countless hours on the phone to reduce our bills because she doesn't understand how to handle these matters. I support her in every conceivable way. The list is extensive. Financially, emotionally, and physically, I have contributed immensely. I have stepped in when my brother went missing, lent her money, assisted her with language barriers, and done her actual job for her. Rarely have I received gratitude, only comments like, "You just need to do this," or, "I would have figured it out eventually." So, why did I hold scissors to my neck today? My mother returned home late, around 8 p.m., which coincided with my return. I had just come back from the gym and had only consumed breakfast all day. My day had spiraled as I had spent nearly 2 hours negotiating with the water company to reduce the bill since she didn't comprehend how to do so. Instead of expressing gratitude, she remarked, "It's good experience for you. And if you hadn't done it, we would have incurred extra charges." I returned home hungry and amidst a weight loss journey. Exhausted, I reached for the last piece of my low-calorie bread and warmed it up. My mother glanced at it, requested a piece, and I declined because it was the last portion I had, although I offered to heat up the regular bread available in the fridge for her. She refused, calling me an idiot while simultaneously insulting me in our native language during a phone call with my aunt. I reiterated that I could prepare the other bread, to which she replied with refusal. Later, I entered her room to share something, but she instructed me to leave as she was extremely upset. I asked her why, and she accused me of being extraordinarily greedy and selfish for not sharing my last piece of bread. I tried to clarify my position, emphasizing the hours I had devoted to assisting her with various documentation, recently calls with bill and housing services. Yet, she insisted I was selfish for not offering her the last piece of low-calorie bread while suggesting other bread options. She threatened to throw her mug at my head, pausing as she reached for it. She labeled me greedy, selfish, and a disaster, insisting that even if she collapsed, I wouldn't share a drop of water with her. I was utterly confused and distressed, trying to explain that the fridge was full, but she claimed she didn't like the other bread due to heartburn. I remarked that she had never informed me about this aversion, questioning why she continued to repurchase it. We exchanged heated words. I confronted her with past instances of insults, asking why she had spent years belittling me, insisting that nothing I did was right, and that the only memories she retained were my supposed wrongdoings. She responded by declaring I was the worst daughter imaginable. I had never done anything good. I took after my father, and she regretted ever asking me for assistance. In that moment, the floodgates opened, and all the years of verbal and physical abuse rushed back. I loathed myself at that moment for ever forgiving her, solely based on her history of trauma and health issues. In a moment of desperation, I grabbed the scissors from her table and pressed them against my wrist and neck, asking, "Should I do it? Should I inflict harm?" She dismissed me, saying I was elevating her blood pressure. I spent hours crying. It hurt deeply to be called abusive, selfish, and greedy. My mother is a decent person, but she is not perfect, and I must be honest with myself. I have forgiven her countless times, yet she seems indifferent to the reasons why. I acknowledge my reactions were dramatic, and I regret them, but in that hour, all I could think of was self-harm. Alone, I took a nail file to my neck, dragging it across just to experience some physical pain. I genuinely desire to move out, but I am set to start a new job in 2 weeks. My probationary period will last approximately 3 months, and once I successfully pass it, I will feel more secure in searching for an apartment or studio, even if it means dedicating a significant portion of my paycheck to rent. Story 2. I'm moving out. Family issues have broken me, especially with a dad who drinks, a mom who vents, and chronic pain that's real. I can no longer endure this situation. And no, I am not planning to take any drastic actions. I have simply reached my breaking point, my genuine limit. I truly need to relocate and distance myself from these individuals. I feel as though I am losing my sanity and am beginning to wonder if perhaps it is merely a fabrication of my mind. More on that later. There are numerous problems present, but I will keep them vague so that no one associated with me can discover this post, or if they do stumble upon it, they will remain unaware. I am 18 years old. This message is lengthy, practically unedited, and likely quite immature. My apologies in advance. My brother has always been seen as the favored child, and I have always been aware of it. I have felt for a long time that my parents care for him more, and they even denied it when asked, to avoid a conflict and the inevitable. That's not true. I have known this all along. You might argue that this is simply my interpretation of events, so I will just acknowledge that and move forward. I am not delusional. He can be insufferable, he escapes accountability for everything because he's a boy, and my father, and now, recently, my mother, always rushes to defend him. He avoids watching the dogs, even when requested, and behaves unkindly towards them without any repercussions. If I show any slight attitude towards the dogs, I face consequences. He evades chores, while I am left to handle certain tasks, especially recurring ones. And he was not required to find a job once his injuries healed, My father was significantly more lenient with him regarding work than he was with me. My brother complained twice about having to fill the dog bowl, right after I had cared for the dogs for nearly 3 years, and he was immediately reassigned to a different task. By the way, my mother feeds the dogs for him and did not do that for me. I have repeatedly asked my brother to stop referring to me as pissy, because I seem only able to express happiness, yet he continues each time my father comes to his aid, and now my mother as well. This leads me to feel as though I cannot express any emotions around him. Well, push back against him, label him something. No, I do not wish to. I will take the high road and behave like a decent person. I am striving to be a better individual, attempting to foster a closer relationship with God, but that is a different matter, and I must uphold my values. He is the favored son. I am the firstborn daughter who can never seem to make them proud. This contributes to my feelings of losing control. My parents and brother frequently alter their expectations of me on minor matters, while not imposing any such changes on my brother. Small details, little chores or tasks that need to be completed, specifically regarding the timing of when I accomplish them, and if I point out that my brother is not executing them as I was retrained to do, my mother responds, "Do not interfere with my parenting. You are not the mother, so just let it be." My parents, and occasionally my brother, also fail to remember a significant portion of the things we have discussed or forget them altogether, and then become angry when I remind them I have already mentioned it, and they failed to recall it. My mother keeps forgetting things about me, but not about my brother. It may seem trivial, but she perpetually turns off the lights accidentally, although this has happened far too many times to count. Even after I have asked her to refrain from doing so and my mother is the ultimate proponent of, "I asked you to change this behavior. You are not remorseful because you did not change," when I am in a room. These minor issues make me feel unwelcome. They never treat my brother this way. Never. I struggle with severe feminine health problems to the extent that I have taken excessive doses of acetaminophen and/or ibuprofen with no relief. I haven't truly overdosed, just taken between 5,000 and 6,000 milligrams of one or the other. All my physicians, until I visited the obstetrician-gynecologist, merely suggested I keep taking it until I felt better. It is unbearable. My first doctor informed me that everything appeared normal on my ultrasound and that it would resolve when I turned 18. It has only gotten progressively worse, far worse, and she never truly listened to my concerns. Recently, I saw an out-of-town obstetrician-gynecologist about it, and I was finally able to begin birth control. But I was unable to schedule an ultrasound and another examination because we are relocating quite a distance away. The obstetrician-gynecologist took my complaint seriously, and considering my family history, she suspected I might have polycystic ovary syndrome or endometriosis and was willing to assist me in managing it. Wonderful news. On the downside, I have been experiencing near-continuous spotting, with the exception of a day or two, before I started the birth control and even now while on it, which signifies I am in genuine pain. Some time ago, I went to urgent care for assistance. They gave me an injection of acetaminophen, which was ineffective, unexpectedly, and ordered a CT scan. I was reluctant about the CT, but I agreed on the grounds that it would be reassuring to know that everything else was acceptable. However, you cannot visualize feminine issues like polycystic ovary syndrome, endometriosis, and various other conditions through a CT scan. It simply is not possible. In any case, the CT results indicated nothing was wrong, hooray. The pain became so intolerable the other night, after I had been packing, that I was literally sobbing. It was accompanied by additional symptoms, and I felt like I might be sick. It hurt beyond description. When I asked my father to take me to the emergency room, he refused, stating, "Your CT results came back fine. They were clear. You are not experiencing any issues, and you do not need to go." My mother stood up for me in this instance and asserted, "You cannot assess this situation based on a simple CT scan. I don't know what the doctor was thinking." That led to a significant argument, and I felt terrible for it. It turns out, my father had consumed 16 18-plus beers that entire day and was in no condition to drive. He has adopted a pattern of drinking 12 in a day or two. This issue distresses me in its own right. However, I am starting to convince myself that the problems are all in my mind because nothing abnormal appeared in my CT results, and I have adopted the belief that there is nothing physically wrong with me, despite my intuition suggesting otherwise, and I feel like I am being overly dramatic. I keep trying to rationalize my pain, convincing myself that it is purely psychological and that I am fine because my CT results came back normal, and my blood work indicated no problems. I consistently tell myself that it is all a fabrication of my imagination, and this never alleviates the pain, as he is always right in his opinions, especially after he drinks. In summary, I feel like a burden because I was interrupting him during his packing time. I cried in bed for an hour before essentially passing out for an undetermined amount of time and felt somewhat better afterwards. I had a yogurt to eat and we had dinner, yet I did not want to be around my father. Speaking of my father, consuming a 12-pack in 2 days is excessive, or finishing a 12-pack in a day and a half is definitely a lot. He behaves differently when he drinks. He always has. Now, at 18, I have come to understand why I have difficulty tolerating my father now, as well as when I was younger. He becomes outright cruel when he drinks. Not physically violent, let me clarify that. Merely emotionally and mentally, and my mother suffers the brunt of it. Always. However, that does not exempt us children from experiencing it. The number of times he has attempted to, and succeeded in gaslighting both my mother and me while intoxicated is astonishing. It is genuinely troubling. My mother refuses to leave him despite their crumbling marriage and how horrendously he treats her. My heart aches for her. He makes her cry and then blames her for being emotional about it. For context, I reside on a different floor than the main one. I can hear him yelling at her through closed doors and multiple levels. He never listens to anyone but my brother and claims that male behavior dictates his unwillingness to heed anything a woman says, choosing instead to tune us out if we speak beyond a singular sentence. I only appreciate my father when he is under the influence of marijuana, period. I have a strong aversion to my father for these reasons. Does this make me a bad child? I recognize that my mother is not completely blameless. I am aware of this. Nevertheless, she does not treat him the same way. Their marriage was never meant to succeed. I have believed for years that they should separate. At times, I also struggle to cope with my mother. She constantly complains to me about my father. All the time, she confides in me about emotional matters, which I find unbearable. I distanced myself and refused to allow her to discuss her emotional issues with me, which has led to a deterioration of our relationship. I feel incapable of having a relationship with her if she isn't venting to me about her problems. When I finally remarked, "I don't understand how you can live with him if he is this inflexible," which was the matter we were addressing at that moment, she replied, "Well, don't portray him as the villain. He isn't the bad guy." I was left in disbelief. It felt as though I was going insane for arriving at what seemed like a rational conclusion based on her comments. Furthermore, I cannot advocate for either parent when they are right, as that translates to taking sides. My father will pull the "I'm wrong, I'm always wrong, always the villain" card, while my mother will become emotional and wield that against me in future disputes. If I defend myself, it is labeled as back-talking, and I need to learn to respect. Otherwise, I will be subjected to paying rent. Regarding the topic of paying rent in our current home, they intend for me to pay rent if I develop depression, not with those exact words, but it is heavily implied. In relation to my parents, they are utterly incapable of communicating with anyone in any constructive manner. My mother yelled at me today when she could have simply expressed her feelings in a calm manner, even providing a partial lie in the process. I still cannot communicate to my mother when she has inadvertently hurt me, whether intentionally or unintentionally, without her reacting in anger and denying any wrongdoing. This is generally how our conversations unfold. It has always been this way, but I have only recently come to this realization as I have matured. I do not confide in my parents, if that wasn't already apparent. The last significant thing I told them was that my, then, best friend ceased communicating with me because she lacked time for me after starting a relationship with a guy. This was not long ago, but I also haven't disclosed that I have a boyfriend, 18 years old, of 1 month, and that I plan to attend his graduation. We will both be 19 by then, and both of his parents wish to meet me during his graduation party, in June, which is halfway across the country in Pennsylvania. I plan to move out about a year after our new house is settled, which they expect me to pay rent for as well, although my mother disagrees and won't communicate it to my father, as I cannot endure this situation any longer. Am I mistaken for feeling this way? Am I wrong for having no desire to remain with my parents any longer? My father and brother were already scheming to transform my bedroom into a storage area game room when I move out anyway, so what will they miss? Not me. I won't even have a room to return to. My brother has been pressuring me to leave since I was 17, and I will soon be 19. Am I a terrible person for feeling this way? Am I awful for not wanting to be around my father when he drinks or my mother when she becomes emotional? Am I irrational for experiencing this pain, despite nothing showing on my CT scan, when I have numerous signs and symptoms that suggest otherwise? Story 3. Met my girlfriend online, fell hard, but constant bickering and family drama led to a breakup. We still love each other, what now? OMG. I, 20 male, and my former girlfriend, 22 female, ended our relationship due to continuous disagreements, and I am contemplating what actions to take next. I initially met this woman on a dating application, and our connection seemed promising. We communicated for a month, gradually progressing towards a serious relationship, and soon after decided to officially date. In hindsight, the pace at which things developed might have felt a bit rushed. We frequently discussed our desire for a healthy partnership, and initially, everything was going quite well, with only minor arguments surfacing occasionally. However, during discussions, I often felt overlooked when she would dominate the conversation. Her family dynamics also played a significant role. Her parents, particularly her mother, were extremely controlling. Her mother imposed strict rules, enforced a curfew, dictated her clothing choices, and would react intensely at any hint of her wanting independence. On her first visit to my home, her mother assumed she would be staying at a hotel and reacted negatively. Her father would threaten that she might drive her mother to a mental breakdown. Eventually, we managed to navigate through those challenges, and her mother accepted our relationship. We even celebrated her birthday together recently, enjoying substantial time together during that week. However, since late January, we encountered a major disagreement that we struggled to resolve. Our conflicts were not explosive. Rather, they involved persistent bickering and disagreements. On one occasion, when her niece and aunt visited, she wanted to spend time with them. Normally, we would be on the phone or video chatting, but I expressed that while I understood the need for breaks, we shouldn't be on the phone constantly. Given that we reside 90 miles apart, it was essential for us to have some uninterrupted time apart from our phone conversations. Often, one of us would become tired and fall asleep while watching a show, which was perfectly fine. I recognized that constant phone calls could become tiring, as could our frequent arguments. For the past 3 weeks, however, she has preferred texting throughout the day and claimed that it was an acceptable form of communication for her. I conveyed my discomfort with this arrangement, noting that I often only heard from her when she was at work or getting ready for bed. She would sometimes express concern that I had been unresponsive and didn't text back quickly, so she hesitated to call me, unsure if I was busy or needed alone time. I had sought reassurance from her recently after seeing numerous social media posts about infidelity, which I acknowledged was immature of me. I just wanted some heartfelt reassurance, but she struggled to provide that, which led me to request some personal space. Recently, she indicated that she was neglecting her brother in favor of our relationship. I explained that his tendency to request her attention late at night or when we were about to watch something together made me uncomfortable. In prior instances, he would explicitly disrupt our time together, seeking to play games right in front of me. Things spiraled on Monday when I shared with her the reasons for my apprehension, stemming from past experiences where family dynamics ruined previous relationships for me. It really hurt to hear her suggest that I was the cause of her difficulties with those individuals, and I wished to avoid repeating that painful history. She stated she didn't mean to undermine her family for my sake, so I assumed we came to an understanding. However, on that day, I was in a poor mental state. Briefly discussing my feelings over the phone, I expressed that I needed to speak with her later. She replied that she wanted to spend time watching anime with her family instead. When I told her, I preferred not to have late-night conversations that felt forced. She later sent me a text expressing her discomfort with my remarks, and that she didn't want to be limited on time spent with her siblings. I felt she was placing the blame on me, and stated that I couldn't continue in a relationship where I felt pressured to choose between her and my needs. After voicing my concerns, she mentioned wanting to postpone our relationship discussion until the next day. The following day, after taking a night to collect my thoughts, I reached out, and she acknowledged her earlier comments could be seen as inconsiderate. I reiterated that I was not ending our relationship, but felt that adjustments were necessary. Despite her acknowledging that she still cared for me and valued our memories together, she worried that she might not fulfill my needs at this moment. I assured her that timing was not the main issue, but rather how she approached the situation. She stated that sometimes she needed to be alone to heal, echoing her sentiment that we both needed space to gain perspective. I suggested that if she was open to it, we could consider taking a break. She said she would ponder that idea, but I felt discouraged. We shared many significant experiences together and were each other's first in many ways. Although we both expressed hurt and a desire not to end our relationship, it seemed inevitable since we have been arguing since late January. Speaking with my sister led me to believe that giving up on one another over such challenges was unwise. All relationships encounter difficulties, and it is essential to work through them together. Yet, she remained firm in her decision that a breakup was the only viable option at this time. How can I genuinely move forward from this point? I desire to continue our relationship, and she claims she wants that as well, but I am uncertain about how to navigate the next steps to resolve our issues, clarify our communication, and ultimately strengthen our bond.